All right, let's talk perks, but specifically, let's talk about theory crafting. Let's talk about maximizing the potential of them. Let's talk about some of the nuances with them, how they're going to be used in ranked, how they're going to be used in pro play, all of that stuff. Now, I want to make it clear that this video is not a guide. This is theory. This is talking about what works and what doesn't, in paper, right? On paper, maybe not necessarily in practice. So I'm going to be talking about some situations that I might not actually recommend in a day, a week, a month, or whatever, because we find out that they maybe aren't the actual best way to do it, but there is a possibility that this is what it's going to be like, right? That there's a way that these are usable. So we're going to talk a little bit about the perk system, when you choose perks, when they happen, right? What you choose, when it's okay to choose certain perks. Are there some perks you always pick? All of that good stuff. So I think something to say about the perk system, it's a lot more dynamic than it leads on to be, right? Because it's not just, I get my perk, I equip it, I pick whatever one. There's levels to it. There's some interesting choices on a lot of characters, right? It really doesn't play itself. I think you have to be really active in your thought process if you really want to maximize using your perks to their fullest. Now, take that into account with, now you have to play around the map, and you have to play around the enemies' characters and their perks, and you have to play around your teammates' perks, and you have to play even sometimes around your own perks. That is something to keep in mind as well. So I think a good place to start here is, let's talk about builds, right? So you can sometimes kind of make a build for your character, and the way I'm going to kind of describe that is that you make a lot of synergies, right? There are some characters that you can put a lot of stuff into one ability, right? And then there's those kind of synergize with each other. So you can maybe overload an ability, or there's really good synergy where you can kind of go back and forth. But I think that Overwatch, we love talking about synergies, especially with our tank characters and whatnot. I think looking at perks in terms of what is synergistic and what isn't, determining how you're going to build your character, is not quite what you should be looking for, at least. I think you need to be able to adapt to certain situations, Just because you can load an ability up with certain things doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work out for you, right? If you're going for a build, right, if you're going for that kind of build, you have to think about the game plan rather than just the fact that they synergize with each other. So a very good example here, I think, is Hazard, right? So Hazard has the perk that gives him 30% more damage to enemies above 70 or 270 health, 250 health with the slash, right? Then he also has the perk that makes his slash go longer. So yeah, obviously I've really made this perk pretty good, right? It's got two really good things to it. But let's talk about where that would be applicable, right? Because I don't think it's always applicable. If you're going against a dive composition, would you really need this type of stuff, right? Even though you might have picked the first perk because you want to, let's say you're trying to put more pressure on their Winston, right? That's what you're trying to do. So you pick that first perk, you get a lot of good damage on that Winston, okay? Perfect, awesome. But then you might be inclined to just pick the second perk because it goes with that first perk. And I really think that's where the trapping is, right? Think about how these synergize together, right? If I'm going against a comp that is a little bulkier, yeah, I want to take that first pick. Or if I want to go against a tank, right? Yeah, or put more pressure on the tank, sure, I'll take that first pick. But especially if I'm in a longer range comp, if I'm struggling to get places, if I'm struggling to actually activate that game plan of doing a lot of damage to those higher health characters that I'm going for, that's when I think you would want to take the leap increase, right? That is when there is synergy there. Your build has really come into its own. There's kind of a reason that you're going for it, right? Otherwise, again, I'll use that example of the dive comp. I think it would be much better for you to get up in their face and brawl and maybe use the lifesteal when they try and look at you, or maybe use the wall one instead, right? So just because perks synergize with each other doesn't necessarily mean that they're, going to be good, right? Or it's going to be good in that scenario, right? I think also a lot of times you can get super overkill, with Tracer here. I can pick up the health packs, restore 1 blink charge, and then I can pick up the recall all or restore all, whatever it's called, blinks on that. But like, at what point is it just like, is it complete overkill, right? Now, Tracer having blinks, that might not be the best example, but just because you can put a bunch of stuff into an ability doesn't mean that you have to, right? Synergy can come from different places, right? So think of something like Mauga here. He's got the, what's it called? He's got the overrun that can reload some of his ammo, and then he's also got the combat fuel one that when you do crits, you get the overhealth. So there's a world here where Mauga kind of unloads a lot of his clip, overruns, gets a bunch of that ammo, gets those crits, right? And then he pops his thing. So he gets the overshields and he gets a lot of value from it, right? Is that the best combination? I don't know. Probably not. But that's kind of the way. They aren't necessarily synergistic with each other, like on paper, or like, you know, like really expressly, but they have a lot more to them. So when you're thinking about that, think of it that way. Another thing that you should think about also is, you know, not everything is going to be about builds and synergy, right? A lot of times you really do have to think, you know, on your feet for yourself, for your team, right? So let me find a character here that can upgrade multiple things with each other, right? So let's say Doom here. This is a good example. Doom has the one where he gets more overhealth when he gets eliminations, right? And then he's also got the perk that, you know, gives him his seismic slam, it gives him rocket punch. So effectively he's going to be getting a lot of overhealth and hopefully getting more elims. And even if he's not getting elims, he's getting extra overhealth, right? But sometimes that might not be the best case scenario, right? If you're going against maybe a Tracer with Pulse Bomb who's really trying to like mess you up or take a lot of your health out, a flashbang or something like that, you're going to need that power matrix. So even though you might still try to get that survival of the fittest, it's probably better in some scenarios not to maximize it, right? Not to maximize all the value that you might be getting with it. I think that's going to be really, really important to kind of understand, right? It's not all about just going all in and going, okay, this is the build, right? You really have to think about the circumstances. So with all that being said, let's talk about picking perks mid-fight, right? Because a lot of times you are going to get your perks while you are actively doing something. And that is something you're going to have to learn about, you know, how are we going to, what's it called? Use our perks here. So I'm going to be, you know, very slowly building up for Juno. Let me actually get the rocket box here instead. But let's talk about some of the things that we really do need to, you know, you kind of have to think about, right? Will the perk win you an important fight? What are the important fights? Well, obviously, you know, if you're at your last breath and you really need to win the fight, that's one of them, right? Or if it's like the first fight, right? That's going to be really, really important. So let's say theoretically this is the game and uh-oh, they're dying. I'm going to get the pulsar torpedoes that lock on quicker and I'm going to try and shoot somebody, right? That just actually saved the game right there, right? So I need to be like ready to go. If I feel like we're taking a lot of damage or we're, you know, something that can push that like advantage right away, I'm going to want to be ready for that, right? That's going to be really, really important. Oh my God, look at that, save that bot as well. Keep that in mind, right? But then when you are thinking that way and you're trying to play for tempo, you have to keep in the back of your mind, do I need this perk to finish my game plan? You know, if I had an idea for my Juno build here where I want to go, you know, super fast, or I want to play super fast with my team, I want to be really slippery, anything like that, the pulsar torpedoes aren't going to be as good with the hyper boost, or then the hyper boost for that scenario, right? And then I would probably want to build into the crit at that point. But now, since I've decided to take this one to go for it, now I have to kind of keep this in mind as I continue to make my build for Juno. You know what I mean? So I can't just like continue on that road. Maybe getting the, you know, the crit thing isn't going to be the best thing anymore, right? Maybe I need that glide boost reset because I don't have any of that self-survivability that I really wanted to get. You see what I'm saying there? So With that being said, right, now you're thinking, okay, so how do I get my game plan back in track? How do I kind of change my game plan? Of course, you're thinking about the enemy team, you're thinking about your team, all of that stuff. But you really also need to be thinking about the game mode type, because I think that it's really easy, you know, to just pick something, win a first fight, do really well, right? Let's say if we're on control, we win the first fight, I do that tempo perk, right? That really turns things around. Okay, sweet. We actually 100-0 them. Awesome. But then we go to the next point, and we fully reset. And now my perk isn't necessarily as good. The other team has their perks now, and it's not what I was going for. It wasn't what I thought our win condition would be. Well, now I'm kind of stranded, right? Now I'm stranded for 2 rounds, and I have to kind of like make the most out of that situation, which is, of course, all possible. But it didn't have to be that way. And so I think you really do need to keep in mind the mode. How much longer do you have playing that game, right? If you're playing Escort or Hybrid, you might want to just pick a perk mid-fight, especially maybe even the major perk, that will just kind of win you a fight and help you snowball the point, because the round will end and everything will reset. But on Control or Flashpoint or Push, that's not how it works. So if you kind of hastily pick something, you might be screwing yourself for the rest of the game. You might need to swap off of heroes. That is something you really do need to consider. I think for the most part in those games where you're going, especially on Control, you're going to really have to think about your end game more than your like moment to moment, right? I think in Control and Hybrid, you really can think of that moment to moment more often. Escort and Hybrid, you can think of that moment to moment more often. But on those other maps, you really do need to think about your bottom line and start planning and preparing for it, right? And with that being said as well, what does the rest of the map look like, right? So I might take, you know, on Sigma, I'll show you an example here. Sigma has a really, really fun perk that's pretty map specific. It's the major perk where he jumps in the air and he can, you know, get whatever, the boots, right? The levitation, right? This thing. Look at that. That's really, really good to get Sigma up to high grounds, right? Now, it's kind of like map dependent. It doesn't go very far, but it can get you up places that he wouldn't before. On something like Blizzard World, I might be struggling to pressure the cart and keep the high ground. So I might be tempted to grab the boots and start floating up to those lower high grounds that have the angles that are easy to get up to. Perfect, right? So we get through the second point of Blizzard World. But on the third point of Blizzard World, it's a lot flatter and the high grounds aren't necessarily as good for Sigma, just how they're set up. So it might actually not be beneficial and you might get stuck on that last point. So even though it was a good idea to grab those boots on the second point, it ended up not being a good idea for third. What's the value there? Well, at least you got through the second point and you got some progress on third, but now you've kind of neutered your way to get through the rest of the map. Of course, in the next round, you can change everything, but, you know, was that decision worth it? Who knows, right? You might have just gotten stuck on second if you didn't take that perk. It's a lot to consider. So, I'm not trying to, like, overwhelm you, but I think these are things you have to keep in mind. You know, as you're dead, you know, as you're spectating, as you're walking back from something, think. Think, you know, oh, how close am I to my perk? What am I looking for here, right? What is going to help us win this fight? Am I even looking to win this fight, or am I trying to win a longer game? That's really, really important to recognize and try to figure out. So, that's what I think about picking perks mid-fight, or at least planning to pick your perks. Now, I think the next thing we can talk about is, should I pick my perks for my team, right? That's a really, really good question. Should I focus on trying to help my teammates out? Should I focus on being, you know, what's it called? Selfish? That is where, you know, it's going to kind of be match to match, right? Do I need to coordinate some of my perks to be the most effective, right? I mean, there definitely are some perks that, you know, like Wrecking Ball has an adaptive shields one that is better for allies, but, you know, allies have to make use of it, right? Junker Queen has one where allies get reload speed when she shouts, but her allies need to be ready and, you know, ready to use it. So that is something that you should keep in mind, right? Is it more efficient to buff other people in some scenarios, or should you guarantee yourself the value, right? And I'm picking Ana here because I want to show you, you know, one of the classic perks, right? Now, Yes, I understand the nano boost one is like you give it to yourself. It's really more for peeling for yourself at the end of the day. But nanoing 2 people at once is definitely still like you guys can make something happen here, right? It is your ally and you kind of going through it. You nano the Anna Brig backline, they become unkillable if they, have eyes and ears. Or you go for something less, team oriented. You go for the headhunter and you try and go crits, right? You can guarantee a lot more value, more often as well with Ana there, right? I'll show you the, the Junker Queen example as well. We can go for the commanding shout, or I can get the one that gives me extra sustain in the fight. If I take this one and my team is, not willing to kind of use it, then what was the point, right? That's really, it's a tough call, right? Like sometimes your team is going to be ready, active, willing, there for you. Other times they aren't going to be. You're going to have to kind of read that in your ranked games. In, organized play, I think there's going to be a lot more things that are a lot more team-based, right? Like Lucio has one. Now, I don't know how good it is, but he's got the Amp It Up perk that, what's it called? That increases the radius, which could be really good for his teammates, right? It's nothing, it's all selfish. It's not selfish at all for Lucio. So this could, in theory, be really, really good. But, are people going to use it? Is it going to be enough? It's tough, right? Especially for speed. Obviously for Heal Song, it's a little different. That's a little more, they just kind of get passive value out of it, but the speed is active. So who knows, right? In ranked, you're just going to have to feel it out. In competitive play, I think it's going to be a lot more like, I say competitive, organized, it's going to be a lot more like kind of situated, if I had to guess. But it's another thing to consider, right? Also, do you pick perks to better support some of their play styles? Or, again, take it into your own hands. What do I mean by that? Well, people play different ways. What if you have a Hazard who is a lot more passive and plays a lot more for passive value, sustain, and disruption instead of assassinations, right? Are you going to be trying to help his dives? Or are you going to try to help his, which is not what he's doing? Or are you going to try and pick a perk that helps him survive and do that? Or conversely, do you want to support the other people on your team? Hazard is good to go. You want to kind of push your team to do some other things, be a little more aggressive in that regard, right? You could take it that angle as well. There's a lot that you kind of have to consider in that department too. Okay, and then another thing we can talk about is, what do you play for? Do you play for perks or do you play for ults? Well, from what it sounds like, at least in OWCS, perks are not as game-changing. At least the minor perk is not as game-changing as the ult. So playing for perks in limited situations, I think, can be good. But for the most part, I think ults are a lot more consistent value. But that does not necessarily mean that you don't have to play for your perk as well, right? There are a couple characters that get really good, perks that synergize with their ults really well. Sojourn is a perfect example. If she can get her overcharged before she pops her ult, then she has the one shot, which is very, very important for Sojourn, right? So then it kind of comes down to the thing about like, okay, what do I want to do here, right? Do I want to use my ult early to, just get the tempo? Do I want to wait a second to get my perk so I can upgrade my ult? Or do I want to just kind of not get either of them and wait for somebody else to get their ult first, because then I can go in and use my extra boosted ult, right? So now you're kind of playing this game about, when do I use my ult? I'm waiting. Who uses their ult first, right? Oh, you've got an ult it's not affected by your perks. Let's try to do you. Or, somebody like Baptiste has a really fast charging ult that does get affected by his perks. And you might find it most valuable to get a super early window and get the automated healing. And now now you've got both of these things that are really amplifying his ult. So far, I think the success it's varied, right? I think a lot of times you should be going for those ults first. But again, there are certain characters like Bap who are going to really benefit from, it's very quick to get a perk and an ult at the same time. So it's going to be really good if you wanted to do that. Now, then you have to make the choice. Is it better to get this than the lamp one? I don't necessarily think so. In fact, I think this one is definitely not as good. I'm going off the edge. It's not as good as the lamp one overall, in my opinion. So that is kind of a tough one, right? You also have to consider that perks build different speeds depending on your speed of play, right? So if you play very, very fast and aggressive, you're going to get your perks first on average. And if you play slower, I think you're going to get your ults first on average. Why? Well, because there's passive ult generation and there is not for perks. So you draw out the fight longer, you keep ticking up the extra ult percentage, even if you aren't doing as much active fighting and damage, which you probably aren't doing in a slow comp, but if you're going in a fast comp, you're doing a lot of fighting, and you're just going to do a lot of damage up front. You're probably going to get those perks way faster than your ult. Now you consider, do I pick a perk that is better on the regular game plan, or do I get ready, because I'm probably close to an ult anyway, should I get ready for that ult fight and upgrade my ult? Again, that's another interesting thing to do, right? There's another interesting choice there. So you might want to prioritize building an ult or playing fast to build a perk that buffs the ult later. There's a lot. There's just a lot of things that you can do here, right? Another thing that you can think of is, what if you just let your teammates get stuff, right? So, something like Sigma is going to take a really long time to build his ult. So, is it worth it to try to play for the Sigma, or should we try to let my teammates get a lot more of the damage, right? Now, this isn't a great example. I think the best example is for a support, right? So, let's say I have a Lucio and an Ana. Well, Nano Boost is going to come online much faster than Lucio ult. So, should we let Ana get all of the healing faster, as fast as possible, so that she can build up her perk first while she's building up that nano? It kind of works well. Or should we just not even care about it, only prioritize building up that ult instead? That could be something as well. You might want to get certain perks super early. You might not care. You might think that the ult is more worth it. I'm trying to think of an example here that would be like a really good perk to get as online as soon as possible. Honestly, Anna's Bionade one or her Sleep Dart one, those are both pretty good contenders. Tracer getting, what does she get again? She gets the Pulse Bomb Radius. That's tied to an ult, but just making the first ult of the game, the fastest building ult in the game, better. Also very, very good, right? Trying to think of another one. Echo has those are both duplicate ones. I forgot about that. I'm trying to keep track of all of them in my mind. It's kind of hard, right? Reaper's got the pretty good one with the Shadow Step going farther. It lets you really push your game plan. I could go on and on and on and on and on, so I'm not going to. So those are just like interesting things that you have to kind of think about, right? What is most valuable? Are ults more valuable? Are perks more valuable? Who has the better perks? Who have the ones that we need, right? There's a couple of perks that are better initiators, right? So like you might want to get Venture's perk up online first so that you can initiate with the, what's it called? Being able to see people underground. I don't know how good this ability is, but that might actually help you take early fights. You know what I mean? You might actually be able to take a fight earlier than normal because you have this information. You're like, okay, let's go here. Come on, let's go. And then everybody kind of comes out of the woodwork and, just goes hog wild. That could be valuable, right? I mean, there is a lot of experimentation that is coming in the future. And I think also, like, in this video, I've talked mostly about, like, getting your minor perks, but this does always apply to your major perks, right? Especially with major perks, I think those are the ones you really have to consider what the other team is doing, right? What is going to really help you? So like Ramatra is an example here that we can talk about. His grenade, his level 2 perk, I'm just gonna grab whatever. His level 2 perk is either, do I want to heal myself, play more for the brawl, play for myself, or, they might have flyers. They might have some really slippery people. What if I throw the vortex and do extra damage and do the extra slow that they aren't anticipating, right? That could actually help me, you know, take an advantage, right? I see these guys, they're trying to escape, I do that, and then I go on them like this, and then we're really like pushing our advantage. Just depends on your game plan, right? So the major perks can really shift how you're going to play the game, and those are the ones you really do need to consider as you're, you know, building, right? The minor perks, for the most part, aren't as valuable, but picking the wrong major perk can have some serious consequences in the end. So you really do need to watch out for that, keeping in mind all the things that we talked about from here on out, right? Some things that I have not talked about that I'll probably talk about in the future, obviously, organized play, but in particular, like synergies and like building an entire team comp with your perks, not necessarily just playing a lot for what is generally good, like actually playing certain things. So I think like an interesting example, let's take Soldier here. You could give Soldier the stim pack that antis him, right? And let me grab it. This is the stim pack that antis him, right? So did he just biotics field? Whatever. You give him the stim pack that antis him, okay? And it's gonna be really bad for him if he's, you know, not able to get healed, or, you know, you could cleanse, you know. There's a couple of options here. You use the stim pack. Oh, I didn't realize you had a choice. You use the stim pack, right? And then you just like, you pump it, you anti yourself. You could swap to Kiri, and then Kiri can use the Suzu. I'm not going to show you actually, but Suzu that gives you movement speed after you've Suzu'd. So you could preemptively Suzu the Soldier when he stim packs himself, so he gets his movement speed like he should have if he giving up the run ability. You know what I'm saying? I'm kind of stumbling over this, but he gives up the extra speed boost for the stim pack. You can kind of give him that speed boost back, or with Zarya, you can give the projected barrier that increases movement. Does the exact same thing. Gives him movement speed and cleanses the anti. So there's synergies here within the roles themselves that we are going to have to find to see what is good. Do I think that Soldier one's good? Probably not whatsoever. But that is that kind of thinking that you have to, you know, consider. You know, something like this, like Sim's got some interesting abilities with the shields getting regened while you're within her teleporter. Well, only a couple of characters in this game have shields, but that could be the difference, right? You know, you could be playing, I don't know, like a Sim Sig comp, and that really works because Sig has a lot of shields on his bar. That is something to consider. Maybe you're playing with, I don't know, Lifeweaver. Doesn't he have some shields? Yeah. I don't know, probably not, but there's another thing. So without going too far, I'm almost at a half an hour here. I am going to end it there, but I want to, you know, hear back from you. Like and subscribe first. But what do you guys think? What are some crazy combinations you found? What do you think is most effective? You know, again, this isn't about actual strength, and it's not a guide, but you might have found that some things are better than others. Some heroes have better perks than others to do certain things. I'd love to hear back from you guys. I stream live twitch.tv/LaneHemingway. That's Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and on YouTube as well. Twitch or YouTube, whatever you want. Really do appreciate it either way. And next, Discord, if you want to see when I'm live, get notified when I do, and other projects, that's my Discord down below. All my links are down below, and join my membership if you want a couple of free videos a month just on top of the ones that I already do. Did I say free? A couple of extra videos a month. They are not free. They're very cheap though. Okay, whatever. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please have a good day.